So you're moving to the Oregon coast and you're just trying to figure out where should you be looking. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about two towns that are really popular, Florence and Coos Bay. All that starts now. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Clem with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from the Oregon coast. If this is your first time to the channel living on the Oregon coast, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. We get people reaching out to us all the time who are relocating, moving to the Oregon coast. We love to help with that process. So if that's you, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link below down in the description of this video and schedule a Zoom call with us. Either way, we would love to help with your move to the Oregon coast. All right, so you may have seen, maybe you haven't seen by now, we've been doing a series of videos comparing two towns, and the towns that we're comparing are generally right next to each other. Lincoln City and Newport, for example, Cannon Beach and Manzanita, towns that have a lot of similarities, Gold Beach and Brookings. Well, Florence and Coos Bay aren't necessarily two towns that get lumped together all that much. They're about an hour apart, maybe 45 minutes. There are some similarities though geographically as far as kind of making up this central and southern section of the central Oregon coast, and Coos Bay, North Bend just being kind of on that northern end of the southern section of the Oregon coast. And these are two areas that people ask us about all the time. There are a number of reasons why. These areas can both be very desirable, but for who, depending on what you're looking for, well, that's what we're going to set out in this video to talk about. So Florence, Oregon is exactly due west of Eugene. So Florence has about 7,000 residents, maybe 8,000 residents. It's a much smaller town than Coos Bay, which again is about an hour south, and it's much more isolated geographically. So you actually, you have to come either from Roseburg, if you're that far south, down Interstate 5, or if you're coming from the north, say from Eugene, you have to go down I-5 a little bit further and then kind of weave your way in along the highway into Coos Bay. So it's a lot less accessible from some of the major population centers throughout Oregon, in particular Western Oregon. And there's really two towns there in Coos Bay, right? So there's Coos Bay and there's North Bend, two towns that are connected to each other. A lot of similarities, some differences for sure. They kind of blend into each other. So this whole area is made up of Coos Bay and North Bend. And collectively, there's about 25,000 people in the area. So this is the population center of the Oregon coast. More people live here than anywhere else. It is pretty dense in the sense that this is an area that was developed quite a long time ago, 100 years ago, back to 50 years ago. And a lot of these neighborhoods are just kind of your typical residential neighborhoods with, maybe fifth of an acre lots, up to a quarter acre lots, up to lots that are much smaller. So there's a lot of housing density in a lot of neighborhoods throughout Coos Bay and North Bend. Again, Florence being a much smaller town that does have some neighborhoods that are just kind of your run-of-the-mill suburban type neighborhoods. But Florence also has a lot of planned communities with HOA. These are a little bit more resort style living. And in particular, when you get north of town, just out of the city limits, you have this Hasita Beach area, which is really considered to be Florence. It's outside of city limits. So you're just unincorporated Lane County. But that's really the only area where you can access the beach. And a lot of the lots around there are like a third of an acre up to a half an acre, for example. So a much different dynamic. There might be some areas, like that around Coos Bay, North Bend, but you have to go a little bit farther. They're not as close in terms of the accessibility to town. There are, though, some similarities for sure. Again, these are areas that people in particular moving from out of state, looking to move to the Oregon coast, are really high on people's lists, I think for two reasons. The median home price is relatively low compared to some other communities on the Oregon coast, in particular in Coos Bay, North Bend. When you're looking at a median sale price of $325,000, Florence creeps up a little bit closer to $400,000, but you can get some relative affordability in that area. So these are areas I think when people are, looking on Zillow, just kind of vetting different towns, seeing what they can afford, how far their dollar can go. They start pulling up homes in the Coos Bay area, in Florence, and you'll see options that, you might get a little better of a deal when it comes to like price per square foot. For example, Coos Bay, North Bend, this area is going to have a lot of older homes. There is some like mid-century. There is some new construction, but a lot of these homes, close to the town centers, are 70, 80, 100 years old. So when you look at that, generally there's going to be a lot of homes with some deferred maintenance, if not a lot of deferred maintenance, fixer-uppers, homes that won't finance. That is something we see a lot in the area, where you can't actually get financing because of major issues. So that could bring home values down for sure. Looking at an area like Florence, this was developed a little bit more recently. You get a lot of development aside from the Old Town area. That kind of has the 100-year-old homes, but you have a lot of areas that were developed in the last 50 years. So you do see a little bit less of that deferred maintenance. But I think overall, in terms of housing options, Florence is going to have less because there's less housing stock. It's a smaller town. But these are areas that start to come up pretty quickly when people are doing these searches. Another thing is these areas both have hospitals. It's not something you're going to find in every town on the Oregon coast. That's something we get asked about a lot, and something that seems to be really high on people's list of priorities is access to healthcare, in particular a hospital. So Florence has a hospital right in town, and then Coos Bay, North Bend has the Bay Area Hospital. And actually, I've seen a statistic that that Coos Bay area has more access to healthcare facilities overall, and more facilities than anywhere else up and down the coast. Kind of makes sense when you look at the population, right? There's going to be more healthcare to support a larger population. But those are things that, again, definitely as far as what people's priorities are, both of these towns have that. So again, another reason why, these areas are coming up on people's radar. As far as climate goes, you're probably going to get more similarity than differences as far as the average temperatures throughout the year. It's pretty mild, just like the rest of the Oregon coast. It can skew maybe a little bit warmer than that northern region, but there are some different dynamics in both areas. You do have some development that goes inland a little bit. So in Florence, you have a ton of lakes like Mercer Lake, Siltcoos Lake, and a lot of lakes filled in on the east side of 101. And there's a lot of development around some of that area. Not a ton of houses, but really one of the only areas in Oregon where you can get lakefront living. Something else that people ask about a lot too. And you get over onto these lakes and off of Highway 101, east of Highway 101, it's like you're in a completely different climate. It could be 60 degrees at the beach. You could be sitting out at the lake. It could be 70 degrees. So you do get the coastal air. You do get a little bit cooler temperatures, definitely mild, but a little bit of a different climate there. Similar with Coos Bay, a little bit of a different sense though, because Coos Bay is kind of protected, and North Bend by some elevation, where you have on the west side you have the beach and the ocean obviously, but on the east side you have the Coos Bay, so this big body of water. And it creates kind of its own microclimate. You get a lot of fog, and the fog might take longer to burn off, for example. You might not get that element as much in Florence. But I think, again, across the board, on average, you're going to get very similar climates and similar average temperatures throughout the year. So another thing, when you look at comparing these two areas, is you're right in dune country. There are some one-off dunes up and down the Oregon coast and some different regions with dunes, but really starting in Florence and making your way all the way down into North Bend, into Coos Bay, there's just dunes up and down that area. Plus, there's areas like Lakeside, which sit kind of right in between. So that has some lakefront living, lake access. Again, and we talked about the lakes up in Florence. So between both of these areas, it's really a dream for the people who like to get out and do things outdoors, in particular on the water. If you're looking at the lake, obviously the beach is accessible from anywhere. Dune buggies, ATVs, driving on the sand, if these are things that you're interested in, both of these areas would be a really good place to land. There's also, of course, a ton of access to hiking and biking, mountain biking, and just the nature overall. So, if you like kind of, taking in, more of a forest environment, you're going to be able to access that in these areas. Again, we know everyone wants to get to the beach and the ocean. Again, lakes are going to be accessible here in both of these areas. Bird watching, whatever it is, kayaking, I think between these two areas, there's not really necessarily a winner. And again, I think, this element, as far as kind of the natural environment, the setting, kind of the geological makeup of the area, very similar, between Florence and the Coos Bay area. All right, so both areas have casinos. Coos Bay actually has two casinos. There's the Mill Casino, which I think might just be into North Bend, but it's right on Highway 101. They have, big RV parking, a big hotel. It's actually a pretty cool place. Spent a little too much time there probably, but yeah, the Mill's a great casino. And then you have, I think, Three Rivers is what it's called, which is over in the Empire area, which is a little bit smaller. But so if you like to gamble, play a little cards, Coos Bay, North Bend, a great area. But up in Florence, you also have a casino, the Three Rivers Casino, probably a connection there. So, if you like to, again, gamble, play cards, whatever it is, do a little slot machines from time to time, both areas are going to have that as an option. All right, so let's talk about some differences. I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind beyond the size, we talked about the population, Coos Bay, North Bend, this Bay area, it's a much bigger area geographically. Florence is a small town, far fewer people. But in Florence, you do feel like you have a little bit more room to breathe. It's probably because the population is smaller, but it's also a little bit smaller as far as its geographical footprint as well. Coos Bay, North Bend, although it's a bigger area, it does feel a little bit denser. So just as far as kind of your day-to-day and the environment that you're in, again, in Coos Bay, North Bend, you're going to be in a lot of neighborhoods, which is great because, that's, creates a lot of community. You're going to be around a lot more people. In Florence, it's going to be easier to be in areas where there might not be as many people around. And in Florence, you're probably looking at a much higher percentage in terms of per capita of vacation rentals and short-term rentals, which is popular because it's very close to and accessible from Eugene. So you might be in a neighborhood, but a lot of the homes in there, on a given day might be vacant. So definitely a little bit of a different feel. I wouldn't say Coos Bay, North Bend feels urban by any means, but it feels like you're in a little bit of a bigger town. Florence feels like a small town. And then so in that same breath, Coos Bay, North Bend actually has two different downtown areas. North Bend is really just one kind of stretch as you come in and out of town on 101. But there's some cool old historic buildings, a couple of bars, restaurants, and there's definitely some things to do. Coos Bay is more of like a 6-8 block area of a downtown area, maybe a little bigger than that, that has a lot more options as far as restaurants, even shopping, but coffee shops, bars, breweries, things like that. There's a lot more of that in Coos Bay. Now, when you look at Florence compared to North Bend, Coos Bay, Florence has a very kind of cohesive downtown, old town area. And I think, at least to some degree, this area is a little bit bigger on tourism, so it really caters to kind of the people coming in from out of town, staying a weekend, staying a few nights. And so there's maybe not more options, but just more of a cohesive old town, downtown area than you can get in Coos Bay and North Bend. Even though it's bigger and there's more options, kind of what you would picture as far as like a little beach town, for a downtown area, probably is a little more picturesque in that way. And another big difference looking at these areas is the median age. So in Coos Bay, North Bend, the median age is 41 years old. In Florence, it's 60 years old. A lot of people go to Florence to retire. This is an area that draws a lot of people from Oregon and from out of the state, for retirement. And I think because it does have a little more of that kind of beach town feel, there is a little bit more room to breathe. It's less kind of bustling. It feels much more laid back, just kind of going around town. It makes sense. And so Coos Bay, North Bend, being a younger population, I mean, there's just more there. There's more people. There's a lot more industry. So there's jobs. There's a lot more infrastructure to support this large population. Where in Florence, you don't have to be there long to kind of get a feeling that you're in, by and large, a retirement community. Not everywhere, not in every section of town, but that's definitely a kind of a big element and a big draw too to Florence. And another thing where you can really draw a distinction between these two areas is the crime rate. So not something we can really touch on too much, but if you look at public data online, there's definitely more, in particular in the way of property crime, when you look at Coos Bay, North Bend. Again, a younger population, a much larger population, bit of a bigger town, not really a huge surprise there. And if you look at an area like Florence, the crime rates are really low. So I think, this is inherent in the makeup of the town and some of the other things that we've already talked about, but that's something that we get asked about a lot. And, we don't want to steer people in one direction or another. Both towns are great. Both towns are very safe, and you're not going to have, a ton to worry about. But at the same time, we want to make sure that, the information that's out there in public is readily available to people. So that's always something that we can talk about. But and definitely, if you look at the data, there is a clear distinction between Coos Bay, North Bend, and Florence. And Coos Bay being a little bit of kind of, again, a bigger town, a bigger community, you do see a little more development. There are some things coming in, like slowly but surely, like down on Front, for example, in Coos Bay. You've had some recent development with some retail business and some other kind of development and new businesses popping up around town. You don't really see that as much in Florence. It doesn't really feel like, there's kind of this booming economy, maybe not so in Coos Bay and North Bend either, but again, Coos Bay, North Bend, there's more industry, there's more people, there's more jobs to support those people, and vice versa. You don't have that element as much in Florence. Florence is going to be, by and large, in a lot of ways, catered to tourism, kind of the adventure sports and all the things that people can do with the dunes and the lakes and things like that. Florence just seems like it's kind of a little more standing pat as far as just kind of, being great and staying great. Coos Bay, North Bend, again, this is an area where you do see a little bit more developed, a little more, kind of businesses popping up, things like that. So there is that difference too. And then the last thing to touch on to kind of, wrap this back around to some of the similarities we were talking about in the beginning is neither of these towns are really on the beach. These are coastal communities at the Oregon coast, but Florence is right at the mouth of the Siuslaw River. So the river comes in and kind of winds down. If you go from the ocean, at least, it winds down south a little bit, and then that old town sits kind of, right where the river is. And then you have this big, really cool bridge that crosses the mouth of the river there. You have to go north of town to get to that Heceta Beach area. 10-15 minute drive. It's really accessible, but the town itself isn't beachfront. So when you look at Coos Bay and North Bend, obviously you're on the bay, and we talked about that elevation that kind of separates the ocean from the bay. And this is a lot of where the town and the population is in this area. So still you can get out to the beach, 10, 15, 20 minutes. There's a lot of beaches that are accessible. There's some really great scenery in this area, especially compared to Florence. I think as far as kind of the overall scenery, when you get out to the beach in some of these areas, Coos Bay probably takes the cake on that one. Those are big differences from what you might envision, especially if you're coming from out of state, you want to move to the Oregon coast. Maybe you want to be right on the beach. You want to walk, 5 blocks to the beach. You're not going to get that in these areas. So that is something that we do end up kind of explaining to people a lot and showing people, and so definitely worth noting. And if Florence, North Bend, Coos Bay are areas that you're considering, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or again, click the link below in the description of this video and schedule a Zoom call with us. Either way, we would love to help with your move to the Oregon coast. And if this video was helpful, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, click the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.